Hold on to your hard-earned cash before you spend over $1,000 on a new phone. I spent many hours watching videos and reading articles, learning how to improve my photography so you don't have to. In this video, I'm going to cover 7 tips and tricks that I've learned to make the most out of my phone's camera. And stick around to the end for some bonus tips. Before we get started on the list, remember that clicking on the like and subscribing will really help this channel out. Alright, so now getting to my list. Number 1 is to limit your ISO or ISO. It depends on how you like to say it. I've noticed through a lot of my usage that the max you really want to get to on a phone is 800 ISO. And that's going to help to reduce the amount of noise in your picture. If you're in a dark spot, add some lighting to brighten up the subject. That way you can keep the ISO within a reasonable range. If you can't control the lighting, then you can go into the phone's night mode and choose the max duration setting. Of course, this is going to be helpful to have a tripod or something to lean on to help keep it as steady as possible. What the max setting is going to do on night mode is that it's going to extend the exposure time. That way the ISO can be reduced. And if you go from the minimum to the maximum, and compare the photos side by side, you'll see that there is a significant reduction in noise. What night mode is really doing is slowing down the shutter speed. So you can also do this in like a pro mode where you can control your shutter speed, and that'll let you do the same thing. If you're taking video, you can also reduce the shutter speed, but you want to keep it as close as possible to the rule of thumb where it's double your frames per second. Tip number 2 is to avoid digital crop when possible. Of course, it's not always going to be possible because let's say you're taking a picture of something across a lake or something. You're not going to swim across the lake to take a picture of something else. Just crop in digitally and do the best you can. But when it is avoidable, you want to walk up to your subject as close as possible until it fits the frame as you need it, rather than zooming in digitally. When it comes to photos, there's more leeway there because the phone's optimization does a good job of cleaning it up. But with videos, it's a different story. Anytime you crop in 2x or more digitally, you're going to see the reduction in resolution. The reason is because video takes more processing power and the phone just can't process each frame that fast and keep it super clear like it would a photo. Tip number 3 is to change your orientation. If you're trying to focus on a specific subject, you're probably going to be better off using the portrait orientation. Whereas if you're trying to take a picture of something wide like a landscape, that's where the landscape view comes in handy. Of course, with photography, there's no set way, but one of the issues with using landscape to capture a specific subject that's not taking up the whole frame is that you're going to have a wide field of view or a wider field of view. So a lot of your attention is going to be split between, the background and everything going on around the photo instead of the main subject. Therefore, switching it to the portrait orientation is going to squeeze that in a little bit and let you focus more on what you want the person that's viewing the photo to look at. Mainly, just try out the different orientations to see which one works best for the photo you're taking. Tip number 4 is to use a telephoto lens for portrait shots. I know not every phone supports using the telephoto lens in portrait mode, which is the best thing to use on a phone, but there are ways to get around that a bit. One thing you can do if your phone doesn't support taking a portrait photo with a telephoto lens is just use the regular photo mode and use a telephoto lens. Afterward, you can use a service like Google Photos or maybe even your built-in gallery app and add the portrait mode or portrait effect afterward. Using the telephoto lens is going to change the whole look of your photo, and it's going to actually produce a background blur that's actually more similar to DSLRs than it would be on the 1X lens. What I noticed is that there's a little less distortion when using the telephoto lens versus using the main sensor, and that's going to give you a closer to true to life photo from what I can tell. Number 5 is to lean on objects or use your own body to create your own steady surface. You're not always going to be carrying your tripod with you, and you might come across a nice photo moment without that gear on you. So what do you do when it's night mode and you need to keep a steady shot? You can use your body. One technique is to sit down either on the floor or on a bench or something that you might be near and use your lap or knee as a steady surface. Another thing you can do is to use your surroundings to create that steady surface. If you're near trees, you can probably use a tree to keep your hand steady, or maybe a light post or something. having something that's fixed is really going to help you get a steadier shot. So this is a good technique to help you get the best out of your photos. Number 6 is to use the timer function whenever you're taking a slower shutter speed shot. This one is good even if you're using a tripod or have your phone in a steady position, because by touching the phone, you're going to introduce some shake, and that's going to add some blur to your photo. So what you do is add the 3-second timer. You don't need that much. By the time it's time to take a shot, the phone has already stopped moving and you're going to have a better shot than otherwise. This one has already come in handy for me a couple of times, and it's something that I always remember. Number 7 is to use the higher resolution modes to help reduce some of the optimization. Not everyone is a big fan of the heavy optimization that phones add to their photos, and this is a great way to reduce that without really changing too many settings. There aren't too many negatives really to this, except that you're going to get a larger file size. You're going to get a crisper photo. You're going to get more detail and ability to crop in without affecting the overall quality of the photo. And you're going to reduce the optimization just enough where you're not going to have an oversaturated photo. I guess besides the increased file size, the other downside is that it takes a little bit longer to take the photo. Some phones more than others. I noticed that the Pixel takes a bit longer than some of the other ones that I've used, but Samsung is actually pretty quick when it comes to 50 megapixel photos. So depending on which phone you have, just keep in mind it's going to take a little bit longer than a regular 12 megapixel photo. Alright, so those were my 7 tips that I promised, and now are the bonus tips. My first bonus tip is to change the aspect ratio on your settings to help you line up the shot that you really want. For example, if you're shooting a photo for let's say wallpaper for a PC or laptop, you're going to want to get the 16:9 aspect ratio setting on. So before I started doing this, I wouldn't really think too much about leaving extra space so that I can crop in to the right aspect ratio later on. And what would happen is that the main subject of my photo would just be cut off just slightly enough where it just wouldn't be a great photo anymore. This is not going to increase the clarity of your photo or anything, but it's going to help you to line things up properly. Bonus tip number 2 is to expand your usage of portrait mode. Some brands, especially Samsung for sure I know does it, lets you focus on inanimate objects and lets you apply the background blur on foreground items. So what this is going to do is just give you more of that blur effect around things that are not your main subject. And when it's on an object in the foreground, it's going to let you focus more on the background, which is, in this case, your main subject. So just try it out on your phone and see if you can use it on something else besides faces. Bonus tip number 3 is to use your telephoto lens a bit more. So what the telephoto lens is going to do, it's going to increase the size and the closeness of your background, and it's going to change the way your photo looks completely. A great example that I've seen of this is having a portrait taken in the city. So you have these tall buildings behind you. When you use the ultra wide or the main sensor, the buildings are going to look a bit small and distant. But if you change to the telephoto lens, it's going to bring the building closer and make it look larger and kind of makes it look more closer to life, really. And besides the background, it also changes the way that your main subject looks. So I'm not saying that you should only be using a telephoto, but give the different lenses a try, see which one works best for the situation you're in and the type of story or picture you're trying to take. And bonus tip number 4, and this is the one that I really feel is going to change the way your photos look the most. And that's just to change your perspective when you're taking a photo. Normally, people just take photos at eye level, and that's just going to keep the photo looking normal because that's just how everyone sees things. So if you just change your perspective, just simply getting a bit lower or getting a bit higher than what you normally are, it's going to help to give you a different look to your photo. It's going to make your photo look like a different scene altogether just because it's not how you normally see things. So just try moving around a little bit, get uncomfortable, get close to the floor, and that's going to give you a better photo overall. So that's all that I have for tips. I'm completely tapped out, and if I learn any more, I'll create another video and give you more tips. Besides that, I do have the affiliate links for the different phones that were used in this video in case you're interested in buying some. And also, if you want to research the phones beforehand, I have a playlist here of camera reviews. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. I'll see you in the next one.